All right, so let's talk about domain and range. Specifically, domain and range if you're given a graph. Not just an equation, not a table of values, not ordered pairs, a graph. First thing we should probably do is talk about what domain actually is. Domain are your possible x values. Okay? And then there's an e there somewhere. Let's try that again. Values. There we go. So possible x values. Your range are your possible y values. So depending on how you think about it, how your brain works, maybe depends on what makes sense for you. One thing that I've done is I will actually look at my graph and see if there's a place farthest to the left where I could draw a line that my graph never goes farther than that line. So in this problem, this position right here is the farthest this graph will ever get to. And if I look at that line that I could draw in there, let's make a little dotted line here. That line is the line x equals -7. That's as far to the left as this graph goes. That's the lowest x value. So that means my domain starts at -7. And I'm using the bracket there because if you look at the curve, right, we do actually touch the value. We have a value here at x equals 7, or -7. So that means that we use the x value of -7. Okay. I'm going to repeat that process, but on the right side this time. Is there a place that I could draw a line farthest to the right of the graph that the graph never goes beyond that line? And I can do that right here. Now, where is that here? That would be at the value x equals 9. So my domain is going to go from -7 till 9. And again, that curve does actually have an x value of 9, so use the brackets. So that's your domain. It's your possible x values. And you read x values from left to right across a coordinate grid. Same idea works for range. The difference is with range, since we're talking about y values, is we want to look at how low does the graph ever get to how high does the graph get to. So how low does this graph go? Right here. And that would be the equation y equals -3. Right, bracket because yes, we're actually using that y value. And then how high does the range go? Well, put in a little dotted line right here because that curve never goes any higher than that dotted line, and that would be 6. And so my range is the interval, right, this is interval notation, from -3 to 6. So that's domain and range from a graph. Now we're going to do some more of these examples to make sure we understand maybe a little nuance or if there's any other issues that pop up. So that's example 1. Let's slide over to example 2 here. And so example 2, if I'm looking at domain, so domain is farthest left to farthest right. So a little dotted line here. And I want you to notice that there is a open circle at the end of this line segment. So if you remember anything about graphing inequalities, the open circle means that we can get really, really close to that particular location, but we will never actually get there. We approach it, but we don't get to wherever that thing is, that number is in this case. And that number in this case would be the value of -6. And since we only ever approach -6, that's what that open circle means, right? We're going to use parentheses there. Okay, that's farthest left. Farthest right, right, we've got this huge dot there, but it's still just a dot. to recognize location here, and that's the value, that would be the x value of 7. Closed circle at that end, this end of the number line, or not number line, try again, this end of the line segment, sorry, means that we actually do use the value of 7, and so we're going to use brackets there, a little extra dot. Okay, so that's domain. Let's talk range. So range is bottom or low value here on y-axis. So that low value there would be -6. Open circle says, I'm going to use a set of parentheses. And now I want to see is how tall does this graph, how high does this graph get to? So there it is. And again, I know that it looks like the black point is above and to the right, but remember, a point like that is simply a location, and it's supposed to be that coordinate grid. So what is that, 8? That should be 8. Closed circle means it's going to take a bracket. So that's example 2. And if you need to draw these little lines in, draw them in. Okay, there's no penalty there for putting little extra pictures on there. All right, example, apparently these are misnumbered, or I'm just doing them out of order, but this is example 2 apparently. You're asked for domain range, and there's a little function notation at the end that we're going to get to. So domain, let's look at domain. How far to the left does this graph go? So left would be right there. So I believe that's -7. I am using -7, closed circle, so I'm going to use the brackets. How far to the right? Well, this graph goes all the way to x equals 10, but it's an open circle, so parentheses it is. And yes, those matter, all right? So please don't use them interchangeably. They mean something mathematically. All right, range. What is the lowest value this graph gets to? Well, that would be this value right here. Now, don't get fooled that there's this little point over here that stops the curve. That doesn't matter. It's the lowest possible y value, and that's actually this dip at the bottom here. And that dip occurs at y equals -8. So -8, bracket there. It's a continuous curve. And then how tall does this graph get? That looks like +8 with a parentheses there. Okay, so that's domain and range, but now I want to look at this function notation. The function notation here is f of 4. What this is asking you, and it looks really weird, but basically what it's saying is, the f is here in reference to the f here that's saying that this is the f of x function. All right, functions can have names, f of x, g of x, h of x, all right? So in this case, it's the f function. This has been identified as the f function. And this f of 4 is asking you, when x is equal to 4, what is the y value of the curve? So on my graph, I am going to go over to x equals 4. I'm going to find my curve. So a couple things you could do. You could absolutely just draw a solid line. X equals 4 is a vertical line here. And wherever that vertical line hits the graph, that's the value I'm looking for. Basically, I'm looking for this point right here. What is that y value? Well, that y value is -8. So you would tell me f of 4 equals -8. You don't need to write the x equals 4 and y equals -8. This is just reminding you what the ask is. That's all it is. So for giggles, I'll change colors. Let's go with pretty purple here. So second little function notation here, same function, right, f function, but this time I'm asking you, when x is equal to -5, what is the y value of your graph? So a couple different ways to do this. For this one, I'll just inspect the graph basically. So I'm going to take my little pointer here, and I'm going to slide over to -5 and just look for my curve. Well, the curve is on the x-axis here. So on the x-axis, all of your y values are 0. So f of -5 is equal to 0. All right, little function evaluation, again, based off of a graph. All right, last one here. Even though it's the fourth problem, it apparently got labeled as problem number 3. That works. All right, domain. How far left does this graph go? -7. Open circle, parentheses. How far to the right does this graph go? +9, open circle, parentheses. Range. How low does the graph go? And that would be -9. Smooth continuous curve at the bottom, so go ahead and use a bracket. To how high does the graph go? That would be 5. Open circle at the top, so we're going to use parentheses. All right, g of 6. Let's see. 6 is right here, so that is right there. That looks like a -3 to me. So I'm just going to put -3 here. And then last but certainly not least, I've got g of 0. So x equals 0 right here. My curve is at -9. All right, so what was the plan for today with this video? Talk about domain and range from a graph. We've done that. Little bit of function notation in there, again, from a graph. So hopefully this has helped a little bit with domain and range when you have a graph being given to you.